Hi everyone, this is Professor Benjamin and welcome to session 12 of this class, which we're going to talk about non-renewable resources and energy. And so this session, I always require that you've watched Gasland 1 or Gasland 2. I know that there are, of course, people on both sides of the aisle in terms of hydraulic fracturing. So I know there's people on both sides of the aisle in terms of hydraulic fracturing. And hydraulic fracturing is the way that we actually get oil sometimes as well as natural gas out of the ground. And so what they do is they actually pump in kind of a slurry of different chemicals which break apart the bedrock below the surface. And then what happens is that the natural gas that's trapped in pockets seeps out, and then there's another kind of filtering system that sucks the gas out of the ground. Then it, of course, has to be all of the wetness has to be taken out of it. And so there's a lot of issues with hydraulic fracturing. Anytime you are working in something that you can't see what's going on, you don't know what the consequences are, how the slurry moves. And of course they say most of the slurry, they suck back out of the ground, but that you can't in an uncontained atmosphere, you can't do that. So there's a lot of problems with it. So I know there are also issues with the film, right? A lot of people don't like Josh Fox. They think he's too liberal. He's too on the one side of the aisle. So the reason that I'm just making you watch the film is I just want you to have the idea of what's going on. Is that while there are plus sides, right, is that the burning of natural gas is way cleaner than oil or coal. Yes, definitely. There are a lot of downsides to using natural gas. First of all, it's a non-renewable resource, meaning that if we use it out of the ground faster than we can replenish it, right, we won't have any left. And right now, it's as if we have 80 years of natural gas at the rate we're going, that we're consuming it. So that's a big issue. And I like the film because it just gives you some back and forth about how the fact that the natural gas industry is unregulated and how that came about through politicians. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, you have to think about all of these things. So that's why I like the film. And you can watch 1 or 2. Now, Gasland 2 talks more about the Mineral Rights Act, which is the fact that a lot of us think we own the land we live on, when in reality we do own the land we live on, only to a certain depth, and then the U.S. government owns the rest. So they can actually side drill through your yard and extract things from underneath your household that you may not. You may say, how come they could do that? Well, there's the Mineral Rights Act. So there's a lot of things that I think it just opens your eyes to in terms of what's going on in the world around you. So that's why I have you watch it. So what is a non-renewable resource? A non-renewable resource is something that cannot be replenished within our lifetime. So if we use it, it can't be replenished. So coal is a good example of this. Oil is a very good example of this. Uranium is another really good example of this. So when we talk about nuclear power, there's only so much uranium that we use in the rods, right? In the rods that we then create nuclear energy from. And so there's a lot going on in the reactor cores. And so when we use too much and we don't replenish it or use it with moderately, there won't be any left. And so that's what this whole entire session is about, non-renewable resources, these resources that cannot be reused. There's also other downsides to non-renewable resources. Of course, oil and coal burn dirty. And there are lower, so coal actually contains a lot of sulfur in it. And there are lower sulfur coals, but of course they're more money to extract from the ground. And they're only found in certain pockets throughout the world. And so these lower sulfur content coals burn cleaner, but they're still dirty. And they contribute to climate change. And so does, of course, the burning of oil. And oil is made into a bunch of different things. So oil extracted from the ground is like this, it almost looks like molasses, but a dirty molasses. And then we refine it. We put it through a refining process and we make it into different things. So gasoline, kerosene, other things, right? We make oil into these other usable things that we can use. And so, what you're pumping out of the gas tank is not, that's been refined through a massive refining process to make it gasoline. And then, of course, we add additives and other things to it, like corn, etc. So non-renewable resources are things that we use that we can't replace within a human lifetime. And that is what makes them, number one, hard to use because we only have a limited quantity. And the other thing is a lot of them burn dirtier. Now, nuclear doesn't burn as dirty, and so does that natural gas. But of course, there's always side effects to anything. Even renewable resources, there are side effects or downsides to everything we use. But also, we like non-renewable resources because they create more energy for the buck, meaning that you use less of the resource and you can create more of energy. Plus, our infrastructure is already set up for non-renewable resources, meaning that the way that we produce electricity, we've done it for so long that we've become masters at it. So we like that, right? We don't like change. Humans don't like change. Neither does the United States. And so the way we've done things in the past is the way we like to do things now. The other thing is that a lot of politicians and a lot of big oil have their hands in each other's pockets. So guess what? We like oil. And we, it makes that whole cycle go round. So there's a lot of things to it. So what are we looking at? Number one, we're looking at non-renewable resources this week. Of course, as always, you're going to read the description first, and we are looking at OER textbook chapter, Non-Renewable Energy. It's a fantastic chapter, so make sure you read it. We're getting towards the end of the semester, so we're way down here. You're going to have the PowerPoint for non-renewable resources. The Gasland, I want you to watch it. You can either find it, on YouTube illegally. Don't tell anyone I said that. Netflix or Amazon Prime. So there's a lot of places you can find it. There are, of course, ways that the government has said that fracking is completely safe. And so there are issues on both sides of the aisle. A lot of people say, oh, it's totally safe. Other people say it's not. So there's a couple articles here. Remember, you're fracturing the bedrock. So this idea that earthquakes can happen near hydraulic fracturing places is totally true. Because remember, earthquakes happen when there's slipping of bedrock, and in this case, that's what happens. And then Yucca Mountain, which is where we would store nuclear waste from nuclear power plants. It came back into the picture again. The Obama administration turned it down, and that is the fact that we would have this big hole in Yucca Mountain where we would store all of the spent nuclear rods because they stay really hot. So they actually have to stay in water to cool them down. And in order to do that, we were going to build this huge kind of infrastructure facility under the ground in a mountain in Nevada. And Obama's administration said, we're not going to do that. The Trump administration said, we're putting it back on the table again. Now, under the Biden administration, I'm not sure what's going to happen. So that will be revisited under the new Biden administration. But there was an idea to revive this Yucca Nuclear Mountain waste site. When I worked at DEP, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, one of the major crews that we had actually in the nuclear section, I was in the air and water and compliance and enforcement section. The nuclear section was testing out ways that they would move the nuclear waste from the sites in New Jersey to Yucca Mountain. How would you get it there? And they looked at airplanes, they looked at trains, they looked at by truck. And of course, there's all pros and cons to all of this. And their whole job, really cool, was to create these like tanks and stuff and then test them out. So they drop them off of like high-rise buildings to try and find out if they would break, if like a plane crashed, what would happen. They would dump them into the ocean really deep to see if they would implode. Because, these nuclear rods are very dangerous. They contain large amounts of radioactive material. And if that got into the atmosphere, what would happen? So that was their job. It was a really cool job. And then, of course, pros and cons to nuclear waste. What would that be about? And then, of course, the whole idea of what's going on in the Arctic and oil and of course trying to stake claims to the land masses underneath the glaciers so that when the glaciers melt, countries already have claimed those territories so that they can have access to the non-renewable resources under them. Just craziness. And then here, political battle over Anwar, which is the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, and under the Trump administration, he allowed drilling in Anwar. Hopefully, maybe that will switch back under Biden, but it's one of the last untouched areas in the world. And Trump said it was okay to drill there. And I don't know what's going to happen under the Biden administration, but hopefully some regulations that were in place maybe will go back into place. Who knows? But these are just current events that are going on. I would spend more time getting into nuclear. If you're really interested in nuclear energy and how it works, etc., of course you can watch a video on it. But if you'd like me to make a lecture on it, I could do that. Just send me an email and say, hey, I'd like you to make kind of a video on it. And I actually, nuclear's close to my heart. I grew up around nuclear energy. I know that sounds crazy, but my father actually built nuclear power plants throughout the world. So I have a lot of knowledge about nuclear energy. Of course, because of that, I have a little bit of a soft spot for nuclear energy. While it does have massive consequences if protocols are not followed, for the most part, it is safe and runs safe. It's just when things go wrong, it really goes wrong. And Fukushima, of course, and Chernobyl are two really good examples of this. And I really find them both situations very fascinating to talk about. But those nuclear reactors have to stay cool, and if they don't, that's when they melt their outer chamber, and then when the radioactive material gets into the atmosphere, we have major issues. But hey, you know, there's some really cool documentaries out there. There's some really cool, like, I think there's that Netflix episode where people go in to really remote, weird places of the world. And two of those places, they go into Chernobyl, and one of them, they go into Fukushima now, which is still a radioactive zone. But people actually pay to go in there on vacation. It's really odd to me, but it's definitely something you can search out and find those episodes on. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. But this week we have an initial post due by Wednesday, response post due by Friday. And some questions, of course, on the final exam come from non-renewable resources, especially Gasland. So make sure you have watched it this week. Have a fantastic week. Again, if you want that nuclear video, reach out to me and I'll make something. Okay? Have a great week. Again, any questions, reach out.